Look, I think strike rate's very, very overrated.
Welcome back to Strike Rate, the cricket analytics podcast with me, Jack Hope, and Dan Weston. Dan, in part two, we're going to go over to our listeners' questions. Although they're not really listeners yet, are they? This is a collection of questions from people who haven't heard the podcast so far. We're going to kick off with Erica from Twitter, who asked, I think, a brilliant question, and it's similar to Tom. So I'll give Tom a shout out as part of this too. Knowing what you know now, what would be the one bit of advice you give yourself when starting out?
Okay, well, that's kind of a fairly controversial one, I would say. It's probably try a different industry, because it's that difficult to break into in terms of going from being like, I don't know, a fanalist, for want of a better phrase, to actually getting jobs with teams. However, I do think that the skills that you can acquire doing cricket analytics, whether you get a job or not, is actually super transferable to other industries as well. So actually upskilling yourself in this area as a hobby would actually potentially put you in good stead for other jobs in the future in a different industry. But also, I think if we're not going down that road, I would say if you were really, really minded to be a cricket analyst, and no matter what, this was the field that you wanted to work in, I would say probably manage your expectations would be the one piece of advice that I would give. Don't expect that within a year you're going to be working in the IPL, because you probably got as much chance of winning lottery as that happening. So, manage expectations, be realistic, expect disappointment, expect people to let you down after promising you the world. I mean, that's happened to me a lot of times. I mean, I've got into a situation, I actually applied for a visa to go and work in PSL, and then got ghosted by the team who asked me to apply for the visa. Like, this stuff happens all the time. So you've got to manage your expectations, and don't throw all your eggs into that one basket and expect things very quickly.
I think that's really, really good advice. And if you think about it, this is a little bit of an obtuse comparison, I'd say, but there are 25 players in most T20 squads, or in an IPL T20 squad. How many analysts do you reckon most of those teams are rolling around with? I'm asking this because I don't necessarily know. What are we looking at? Maybe one guy doing video and one guy doing recruitment?
At the most, probably. I think that realistically, I think that the term analyst can be used very loosely. So I've already sort of said, okay, well, the guy who's coding and maybe doing a bit of video, I don't really think that that's like really detailed analysis, but a team will have one of them pretty much always. But to some degree, that's a box ticking exercise. When I look at analysts, I'm talking about an analyst who affects the decision making of a team. I don't see that there's that many in the IPL who would have a massive voice. Probably, actually, I would say as many as the 100, where I would say that actually teams are a little bit more efficient in understanding what is good and what is bad, and giving an analyst a little bit more of a voice. But yeah, no, it's certainly a very, very under explored role. I mean, my kind of theory over a long period of time is that actually a team would be better off not spending all of their money and then using that money to build a better analytics department in terms of the expected points per game gain from that. The same with county cricket, you know. When I first started, a lot of teams were like, "Oh, can't afford all this, can't pay all this." I'm like, you've got a 23-player squad, and like there's 5 guys who don't play. So how about you just cut a couple of them and then use that money to build a really good analytics department, and that will actually boost your points per game massively compared to the value of those players who don't play.
Yeah. We're going to carry on with questions from Twitter. We had a couple from AA, and I'm going to try and bring these down into one slightly more coherent question. He asked about skills, which I think you covered really well in part 2, but then goes on to ask, like, what can you do to actually get noticed by teams? assuming that you do have good coding or statistical skills. So you talked about diarising, and maybe you go into that in a little bit more detail here. Like, what was it that got you noticed?
I think it was a lot of persistence, and what I did to start with, I focused a lot on blast stuff in England because obviously I'm English, and it was just a really good starting point. And then what I would do would be I would tag players into it, and so if I did like an XY scatter, for example, and a random player who probably maybe not be the highest profile player stood out, I would then tag them into it, and eventually you build up a head of steam. And I remember like the first player started following me, and then like within about 2 days, 10 followed me. So that actually, then you're starting to. They obviously talk, and then they understand. And then sometimes from there, actually, I got a few like private messages from players about like what they do and stuff. I remember one guy. I can't say who it is, but he played for England for quite a while. He messaged me and asked me what his death strike rate was. This is like when I first started. And I told him what it was. And the first question he said to me after that was, "Is that good or bad?" So like there's no at this point I was like, I knew it anyway, but if you needed any more confirmation that these teams were pretty inept at telling a player what numbers are good and what numbers are bad, and I think that was it. And so yeah, basically, yeah, just be persistent. Keep tagging players or decision makers into this, and they might get pissed off with you. But do you know what? Actually, you've lost nothing. You are at a place where you're nowhere. So take risks. And you have to do that.
And the other part of AA's question is about technical skills. So you talked about this to some extent. I think they want us to get into it in a little bit more detail. What they've asked which programming language would be best to learn first, and I don't know if you've got a viewpoint on that. I did a little bit of research into this, so if not, I can pick it up.
I've never learned a programming language. I don't feel that for what I need to do, it's necessary. I accept that, as you say, on a kind of a bigger scale, if you want to work for one of the analytics companies or TV company or Cricket Info or someone like that, you probably will need those skills. But that was never what I wanted to do, so I never had to learn those skills. And actually, to be honest with you, it's probably an area that I wouldn't really have a lot of motivation to upskill in, because I don't feel that that's my forte. I feel that the numbers and stuff are much more, and explaining them, telling a story, that's my forte. Not coding is for me, or learning a language or whatever. It's not what I wanted to do. And so you can definitely become an analyst without those skills. And it makes me laugh when you see jobs advertised and that's a prerequisite, because it's really not.
If you do want to go into that side of things, though, maybe you do want to work for CricViz or an equivalent somewhere else. Generally, I think R or Python or R then Python are the languages that would be most useful. And if you look at baseball, for example, which is the gold star of sports analytics, if you like, and cricket's probably trending towards, they'd be the languages that they would want if you wanted to work in a team's analytics department. So yeah, and I suppose as part of this as well, like if this is what you're interested in, if working if you want to be an analyst from a coding perspective, I think that's as viable a route as an alternative. You just have to recognize where your skills will be relative to somebody like Dan. So is that probably fair to say, Dan?
Yeah, definitely. And everyone's got different reasons as to why they want to get into analytics in cricket or in any other sport or in any other industry. For me, my passion was always to try and help people on the pitch and to make better decisions. From watching games, that was always what I wanted to do, and to help people understand this sport better. And you watch a film like Moneyball, for example, and that's the kind of key premise of that in terms of on-pitch performance, looking at it impacting on-pitch performance. So that was always kind of my dream, was to get to a position where I could help teams get better and be successful. But as you say, there's other areas that you can get into as well. It's not necessarily just that.
Yeah, and I think as well, Moneyball's a really interesting one. Like, I can pretty much guarantee you that Billy Bean doesn't know R or Python, but he understands how to interact with people who do, and to get them to ask the questions that he wants the answer to. And when they give him information, or when he sees information derived from that source that would be useful to him, talking about in the film Moneyball or in real life, he was able to apply that and tell a story to players and to his manager and to his boss in the organization that led to better decisions being made, and ultimately, like, someone writing a book about him and then making a film about him. Who would you get, just as a tangent? Let's say you become cricket's Billy Bean. The ultimate dream is realised.
That's the goal.
Which actor plays you, do you think? Is Brad Pitt for Billy Bean? It's not bad. Who would you choose?
There's been in the times that I've done the cricket podcast with you, Jack, there's been a few people commenting about lookalikes and stuff like that. So the one that gets trotted out more than most is Dana White, who's
okay.
So even though he might not have much of an acting pedigree, we'll go with him.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. Andy on Twitter says, "Why isn't cricket analysis more accessible like in football?" What's the reason for that? I think that's, he's generally there talking about data sources and stuff like that. But also, if you think about cricket writing, there's not that much in the way of detailed analysis. And when you watch it on TV, if there is analysis, it tends to be quite tactical, like, oh, he bowled 2 away swingers, then an in-swinger. It's not bigger picture stuff.
Yeah, it's more technical than understanding the format, for example. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's probably several reasons for this. And I think Jared Kimber on his recent Substack actually really nailed the media subject on this side of things really, really well. In that, for example, cricket would really benefit, I think, from like the version of The Athletic, which I think would be a fantastic product if someone could get that off the ground. And in terms of that, the media scrutiny, and there's no scrutiny right now. Like there's T20 teams who are like consistently atrocious year after year, and there's no scrutiny. There's no, I remember like when Frank Lampard was manager of Everton, his record was so bad, and it was literally plastered everywhere on the internet, newspapers, you name it. There's T20 coaches with pretty bad records. You wouldn't even know. The average fan wouldn't even know. So there's no scrutiny, there's no accountability. And having a better media side of things would definitely accelerate that. I also think that there's more finalists in football, and so there's more demand for that type of thing. Although I think there could be that scope in cricket for sure, if there was more kind of availability and a pathway from that into full-time work. People in football who are doing stuff online, who are doing good work, they usually get snapped up pretty quickly. That doesn't happen really in cricket right now. And I also think that there's gatekeepers in cricket that perhaps don't quite exist in football. Certainly you can get football data for free at a pretty good level, but as in a pretty thorough level. You can't really get that in cricket. And there's certain organisations who are very protective of that data. And I think actually the democratization of data would be a really, really good thing in cricket.
I'd massively agree with that. If even from a point of view, if it would allow people to check the work of some of the bigger organisations and see whether...
Peer review.
Yeah, peer review, just from a peer review point of view. Dan, I think we've got a couple more questions to wrap up this show. We had 2 in from Niharika on Substack. The first is, can anyone from any field of study transition into cricket analytics? And the second was, are there any online courses that you can do? So I think the second one and the first one, they're both interesting. Answer them in any order.
Yeah, I'll go first of all with the first question about any field of study transitioning into cricket analytics. Look, I think that if you've got a passion and you're a good communicator and you're good with numbers, I don't think it really matters what field you're in. Like, for example, I came from online poker. I mean, that's a completely different field. Yeah, there's a lot of parallels. I genuinely think there's a lot of parallels from cricket into other industries. I mean, when my wife was doing, like, she'd have, like, when she was working, she'd have like a screen full of data because she was auditing shops and stuff like that, and part of her job. And I would be like, why don't you do this, and this, and then it would highlight this and that. Then you'd be able to work out who's stealing from a shop or something like that. And she's like, really? You do that? You do that? Yeah, because there's equivalents, right? You can use your skills in different industries. And so I do think that generally, yeah, if you've got passion and you've got those kind of skills, I think why not? Why not give it a go? And then the second question about online courses, I've got mixed feelings about this. I'm not going to lie. There are people who provide online courses and make it out like it's really easy to get work if you do this online course. I'm very uncomfortable with that, because I can tell you right now, getting those jobs is not easy. So to use an ability to get a job at the end of an analytics course as a selling point, I'm not comfortable with that at all. So I've never done a course as a student. I've little bit considered offering one, but I just don't feel comfortable with it right now, given the state of the industry. I can't. I don't really want to charge people a lot of money to learn something that they can't do anything with. I don't think that's fair. So, in terms of courses, I don't really have a lot of insight to give, apart from make sure that if you do part with some money, that you're actually going to get value for it.
Yeah. This is the last question for this episode. Before we get to it, though, I just want to thank everyone that did send us a question, whether that was on Twitter, Substack, or via email, wherever it was. I also want to remind people to click like and subscribe if they're watching this on YouTube, or follow the podcast on whichever platform you've picked this up on. Obviously, this is our first episode. We've not pushed it too hard on this one, but the aim for us is to build that critical mass of viewers and listeners as soon as possible. So if you've liked the first 35 minutes or so, there's plenty more planned. Why don't you stick around? Dan, to wrap things up, Cricket on Your Screen says, if a child dreams of becoming a cricket analyst, what sort of road path would they expect to take, and would a degree enable them to take an easier path, or would it just be an added document on your CV?
Okay, so I'll take the last part of that question first. A degree, I don't think, is particularly relevant or mandatory. I did a degree. I did a degree in accounting and finance. Have I used that in being a cricket analyst? No, apart from that I did like a decent module on Excel, and that's really helped me subsequently. But in terms of the actual accounting and finance part of it, no, it hasn't really helped me at all. So I just look at it as Cricket on Your Screen describes, an added document on your CV. You look, I'm not in a position to employ anybody right now, but I get so many messages about it, CVs, no matter what. I'm more interested in practical experience than a degree. That's my personal preference. I want to see someone who's got up and done these jobs. Maybe they've interned somewhere. Maybe they've just tried to find roles, maybe in different sports or something like that. Just started from the bottom. I'd be much more interested in someone who's shown like kind of that self motivation and skills in the industry, at least to some degree, rather than having a document on your CV, basically. In terms of the road path that one would expect, I mean, it's really difficult to say without seeing how this industry evolves. Jack, you talked earlier about baseball and how that's kind of like the gold standard for analysis. I think cricket's a long way from there right now, a long way. And it's getting there at a snail's pace. I think that there are, for that pace to increase, to accelerate in terms of being much more demand for analysts and accountability for failure, there's got to be more jeopardy in these leagues. So at the moment, you've got the same players going around and earning money and playing all these different comps, and it doesn't matter if they fail because they're going to get more money playing somewhere else like a week later. Like there's guys now who have been released, well not released, but their teams didn't qualify from the SA20 and they've gone to play in either like Bangladesh or ILT20 immediately. Like literally, they fly on like the day or the day after their team's been knocked out, and they go and play. And trust me, the money, I know the money that they're getting, and it's insane. So there's no actual real accountability for failure. And so all of that has to be rolled in. So, for example, at the moment, an owner views this as an investment that's always going to make money for a team because there's no jeopardy. Doesn't matter if they come top or they come bottom. Then just as long as they sell the TV rights for a load of money and sell a few shirts and do a bit of marketing or whatever, this, that, and the other, all good. Doesn't matter. So there's no jeopardy. So you don't have to have a lot of skin in the game right now. I think there's got to be a lot more implications for failure and a lot more rewards for success. I'd like to see relegation, but I don't think it will happen anytime soon. But yeah, those sort of things will accelerate the process quite rapidly. So in terms of a road path, which getting back to that original question, is very, very difficult to establish because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. At the moment, I would say if you're maybe at school, secondary school or something, and you want to get into this field, just start diarising stuff straight away. There's nothing stopping you doing this. And then when you're 18 or whatever, you've done your A-levels or equivalent in a different country, then you can go and try and market yourself. And you've got that content out there already. Why not? Why not just keep working on what you enjoy, what you're doing, hypothesizing, keep playing with numbers and see where it takes you.
Can I make a counterpoint to just wrap up the show on the degree point? I would say from what you've told me on this podcast that setting out to be a cricket analyst with that as your one and only ambition might not be the smartest move of all time. So if you're even if you want to do that, perhaps it's worth considering what your fallback plans might be. So if you're asking, like, would a degree be useful? I think you're absolutely right. Practical experience is what's going to ultimately get you the job. But along that journey, if you take a degree that gives you skills that will be applicable to your what was your fan hobby? You had a much better phrase for it than fanalist, yeah. But while you're being a fanalist, let's say you take a degree in astrophysics, you're going to learn things about how to manipulate numbers. You probably learn a little bit about how to code. You're going to expose yourself to a load of knowledge that will be practical for your fanalism. But at the end of it, you're going to have a highly employable degree, even if a cricket team doesn't want you. So don't I would say, thinking about your life and the big picture of this as well. Like, not that that's what you were saying, Dan, but like if you're thinking, I want to become an analyst, you have to think about where you're going to pick up those skills, and a degree can be one of those areas. And if you do go down that route, you might end up being able to transfer those skills into finance or astrophysics or whatever it is. And it might not be cricket, it might not be your dream, but you'll be well remunerated for that, and you'll be happy you made that choice.
Yeah, probably should clarify at this point. I'm not saying that a degree is a bad life choice in this life, because it's probably not. But just simply that I don't view it as a prerequisite to be a cricket analyst. That's all. So as you say, like I think cricket on your screen phrased it as if a child dreams of becoming a cricket analyst. That's a sort of that if it's your one and only choice, and literally you're going to be unemployed for the rest of your life if you don't get a job, then you probably don't need a degree. If you want to work in a different industry, you may well need a degree.
Yeah, great, Dan. I think that's a great way to leave part one. In part two, we're going to talk about getting a job, how you actually do that, and the beginnings. Like, what does the first steps of being an analyst actually look like once you get that job? Thanks very much for listening. As I said, do make sure you like and subscribe. You can follow us on Twitter. Dan, you are at SA Advantage, and I'm at Jack Hope 0, which is my batting average in cricket. And we'll interact with you there. If you want to hear about future topics, we'll always be tweeting stuff up there or announcing it on Substack and stuff. So make sure you join us. Goodbye.